and we're going to focus almost exclusively on the La Plata project and this recent strategic investment. We'll give a little bit of an update on our high-grade Kino silver project in Yukon and our Alluvial project, royalty projects in Klondike District as well. But starting right out, so we have our president of Metallic Minerals, Scott Petzel, in the top of your screen there. We have our CEO, Greg Johnson, who you all know, and Byron King. So maybe we'll start off, Byron, just give a little bit of who you are, a little bit of your background and what you do.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Byron King. I'm a newsletter writer. I'm a geologist by background and training, among other things, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but I really sort of used the geology side as the core. I mean, I served in the U.S. Navy and a lot of other stuff, but I always wound up coming back to geology. I'm an old hard rock guy, mines and minerals, mineralogy, crystallography. The newsletter group I work with, you may recall, you may know it as the old Agora Financial, AGORA, Agora of Baltimore. Over COVID, like many other things, we had our turmoil and upheavals, and so we changed the name. We're Paradigm Publishing now, Paradigm, Paradigm. I work with Jim Rickards. You may have heard of him. He's on, Zero Hedge. He's on lots of different, YouTubes. He's been interviewed all over the place, big macroeconomics guy. And I kind of slipstream behind him. He talks about the big picture, monetary things that are going on in the world, all of which come back in so many ways to gold, silver, and basic commodities like, copper, lead, zinc, and, the stuff that makes the world work. So I work with Jim on a publication called Strategic Intelligence. I also write for a newsletter called Lifetime Income. That's all at the Paradigm thing. And I'll just give a real quick plug at the beginning. We're going to put something in the chat. I believe that next week, which is May 17th at 1:00 p.m. Eastern time, Jim and a woman named Daniel DiMartino Booth are going to do a live cast. Anybody who's watching is invited to click on the link that will be provided. Sign up. It's free, no cost. We're not going to bug you or anything else. It's just an important discussion of gold, silver, where things are going monetary wise in the world. It should definitely be worth an hour of your time next week. But anyhow, that's that. But anyhow, that's who I am. That's what I'm doing. But today we're going to talk about metallic minerals. And as a newsletter guy, I've followed metallic for 7 years. Like metallic and its predecessors. I've known Greg for, oh golly, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, something like that. Chris, I've known you for a long time. Scott, so I'm familiar with the people, the players, and the assets, and I'm loving this talk that we're going to have today.
Thanks for joining us, Byron. It's always good to see you. It's been a few months, but I suspect we'll see you again soon, and maybe we'll see you at the La Plata property. We're also going to tap your expertise a little bit on the commodities and the broader markets and things like that as we progress. But maybe we just jump right in. Scott, Greg, I'm not sure which one of you would like to lead us off, but maybe we just jump into a little bit of the background of La Plata, the acquisition, and what's happened over there.
Yeah, maybe I'll kick things off, and Scott can hopefully share some slides with us to get us all excited about the upcoming work. It's been an exciting couple of years with La Plata. We originally acquired this asset in 2019, late 2019, and first exploration program in 2020, first drilling in 2021, and then a follow-up program in 2022. So it's been a rapid move from acquisition to confirmatory drilling to first resource that we published last spring, 22, and then an updated resource coming now based on the two big drill holes and the new discovery that we made and announced in February. The background here at La Plata is pretty interesting. This is a district that's had a long history of high-grade precious metals, particularly silver and gold production in the surrounding epithermal high-grade veins. The porphyry system sits in the center of the district. The mining historically took place mostly from the 1800s to the 1940s, and then was shut down during World War II. Most of those smaller scale miners didn't come back, but the majors, being first Rio Tinto in the 1950s, came into the district recognizing this exposed porphyry system that was the driver for the high-grade veins in the district, came in to drill it and take a look at the system as a copper system. And so that really was when La Plata first got kind of put on the radar screen. Through the 1960s, drilling by a couple of other companies, and then Phelps Dodge, who is today Freeport-McMoran came in the 1970s and undertook another significant round of drilling. And then the project kind of went idle. If you recall, in the 50s and 60s, copper price was at 50 cents a pound. So the grades that they would have needed in those days, much higher than the mines that are operating today globally for copper. 1995, Freeport drills a single drill hole, testing some concepts, and effectively there's been no work since. So this is a major porphyry system in the southwestern US, road accessible, that really hasn't seen significant exploration for the last 50 years. So for Scott and myself and the team here who brought our experience from Galore Creek with Nova Gold, we were quite excited to take a look at this kind of precious metal rich copper porphyry system at La Plata. And I think, one of the things that we were always anticipating, optimistic about, was the potential that not only could it be a major copper system, but that it could have very significant precious metal credits that came along with it. So we announced our results February 28th, just ahead of the PDC event. And that discovery, which was one of certainly the best copper precious metal discovery holes in North America in the last couple of years, the best ever drilled at La Plata, really lit up attention in the project. And we had core on display at the PDAC, and that invited the attention of all the majors. Particularly copper is such front of mind for many of the major mining companies today. And that was the beginning of our initial discussions with Newcrest and others. And so really it led to what developed into this strategic equity investment by Newcrest that we announced yesterday.
So I think we've seen a lot of activity, M&A and M&A chatter and stuff like that. Byron, you've obviously been following these kind of developments. Thoughts? And is this a trend that's going to accelerate? Is there a new baseline here in those sort of M&A activities, do you think?
Oh yeah, I think we're in about, let's say, the second inning, maybe the top of the second inning even. We're early in the game on this whole commodity super cycle. Things go up, things go down, the price of eggs go up, price of eggs go down, but in terms of the next, 5, 8, 10 years, 20 years, it is a resource poor world that we're looking at. 8 billion people. People are electrifying, and that's before you get into the whole green movement, because the green movement just sort of takes a completely adds a whole new shot of adrenaline to the program. I mean, just 8 billion people, of whom most are living in not a first world standard of living. They want electricity and microwave ovens and air conditioners, just the basics of a standard of living. And then you throw in, we're going to rebuild the whole grid, we're going to electrify the car fleet, the truck fleet, et cetera, et cetera. I hope people may or may not know this, but if you have an internal combustion car, a standard, gasoline powered car, if you take it apart and you weigh everything, you'll have about 50 pounds of copper in your gasoline burner car. I mean, it depends on the car, 50 pounds more or less. If you buy a Tesla or another EV, you immediately go to 250 pounds of copper. So right away, where's that extra 200 pounds of copper coming from? Multiply that by, literally tens of millions of vehicles, hundreds of millions over the next couple of decades. So it's a thing, it's happening. Metals are big. Greg, you mentioned PDAC. I watched your table there at PDAC. You rented a booth and you just set out the table. You basically had a core shack that ran the whole week. And I saw with my 2020 corrected eyes here, people walking up looking at your core. They were fascinated by it, and the names on the badges kind of gave away the game. So yeah, I could see why people were excited. For people who don't know it, what are the details? It was a long core, a lot of meters, and a lot of grade. With lots of numbers when you do the multiplication. What I don't think you told everybody the numbers.
But I think we're about to. So Scott, having had the background there on the project from Greg, maybe just jump into that particular exciting intercept that got this entire kind of ball rolling very fast.
Well, I will, Chris, and I think the best way to do that is to actually share a few slides off of our corporate deck, which is on our website and available for everyone to see. So I'll call this up really quickly and go full screen here. And just to step back on some of Greg's comments, that mineralization in the district was first found in the 1700s. Well, they were focused on these high-grade epithermal silver gold telluride vein deposits that were produced by mom and pop operators and prospectors from the 1850s through the 1940s. And then at the World War II, the small mines were closed and the majors moved in shortly after the war and really focused on the center part of the district, which hosts this precious metal rich porphyry system, which has really driven these high-grade epithermal vein deposits that are distal to the center part of the district. The subsequent rush that began in the 50s with Rio and Freeport and the other Exxon and Cerro and the other small groups that were working in the district really created a fractured land position over the center of the porphyry system and resulted in a really compact drill pattern that was executed by those companies focused on the Allard resource area. So in this cross-section, which is a schematic cross-section through the district, essentially runs east-west. We're looking to the north, and it's about 10 kilometers across here, maybe a bit more. But the intrusive rocks, the porphyry rocks, the rocks that host the copper deposit, disseminated stockwork, veinlet copper deposits are in the pink and blue colors, but the primary resource area that we're focusing on now and that we announced in April of 2022 is in the Hatchard area below and subsequent to the Allard Tunnel in the center part of the district. So all the drilling was really focused in this area, and historically, including the drilling we've done in the last 2 years, we're now up to about 58 drill holes and 17,000 meters of drilling in that porphyry center. And hole 2204 that was announced in February is off the end, was basically drilled to try and identify extensions to the inaugural resource that was announced last year, and of course very successfully, and we'll get to that in a second. But the other thing I want to mention is that over the course of the last 50 years, there really has not been a lot of exploration work done in the district. With the last drill hole drilled was a single drill hole drilled in 1995, but prior to that, most of the drilling ended by 1980. And you can imagine that the understanding of copper porphyry deposits and how they form and the technology to explore those has advanced, that we're really in a sweet spot here to understand not only in the larger context of the district, where now, because of all the lack of exploration in the 50 years, we've been able to consolidate that district largely and have the ability to apply that technology systematically to help make new discoveries. So what we're seeing is not only the opportunity to greatly extend and build resources in the Allard resource area in the center part of the district, but also we see the opportunity for new target areas that are developing that are very similar to the Allard resource, sometimes up to multiple kilometers away from the center of the resource area. So lots of opportunity there to grow. And again, what you're seeing in this slide, typically, if you're a layperson, you don't understand necessarily what's here, but the pink and the blue are the intrusive rocks that hold the copper, intruding into sedimentary rocks that are the more horizontal units in this figure, and together spells opportunity. Let's look at the next slide, which is actually a video. And what we're going to do is look at the impact of hole 2204, which is shown here in this graphic. And we'll step through the video. But essentially, we're starting with a plan view. So we're looking down on the resource area, and we're showing basically the access roads that develop or allow us to get to drill sites in the district to develop more drilling and extend this resource with future work. And what we're going to do is go transparent. We're going to show the drilling that's been done over the top of the resource area. And we're beginning to see a faint light blue color that represents essentially the orientation of the mineralization in the subsurface. And now we're rotating this model up into three-dimensional space where we're looking in a cross-section view towards the south. And I'll just stop and say that these different shells that you see are different grade shells of increasing grade towards the middle. The middle is a 0.4% copper equivalent grade shell that did not exist prior to the drilling of 2204, which is this hole right here. As we rotate, you're going to see more of 2204 come into clarity, and you can see the amount of high grade down the hole. So the warm colors, pinks and the reds, are higher grade. The hole ended in mineralization and was originally designed to be a 1,000-meter deep hole. We ended up, for technical reasons, having to stop the hole at around 815 meters. But it's continuously mineralized, increasing grade downhole, ending in something like 5% copper, 50 grams of silver, half a gram of gold, 5 grams platinum, 5 grams palladium. A really outstanding hole with the prospects of the exciting prospects of being able to really deepen that intercept and extend it with deeper drill holes. But the other key thing about that is it really is open coming out of the screen, and you'll see that right there where it pauses. Essentially, this hole is up and out of the way, but this concept of being wide open to the north, away from the resource area, is quite compelling in terms of the ability to add resources as we go. We'll just continue spinning around here briefly, show you all the historic drilling and the primary resource areas up here. And again, lots of room to extend this in this more tabular looking deposit out to this orientation. And we're excited to do that with what we would call a phase 1 drill program coming up sometime in June, where we're planning on drilling nearly 5,000 meters of drilling in a first phase, looking at following up on that drilling from 2204, extending the resource further, and really testing that high grade at the end of that drill hole to understand what we have, where we think we have significant scale opportunities here to move this quickly into a much larger resource. Outside of the resource area itself, on this slide, we looked at the cross section, we looked at the model. Everything that we just looked at in the last slide was within this outline, where the resource exists and all of the historic drilling exists on the property is within this red outline. But what we see within this yellow outline is the effect of that porphyry deposit alteration, the footprint of these porphyry systems that contain the copper, silver, gold, and platinum and palladium. And it's a very large circle. And it's based on the identification of what is a spectral imagery here, which is mapping clays at surface associated with that porphyry intrusion. And we see mineralization on the backside of this ridge that's exposed and has multi% copper and multi-gram platinum palladium numbers in surface rocks that have not been tested. So on the whole, we see a lot of room for potential additional porphyry centers in the deposit that may yield similar or better results than what we've seen in the Allard resource area and with our drilling at 2204. So we're really excited about the future. And I'll stop there, I'll unshare and get back to the dialogue.
So just, Greg, I'm going to toss it over to you in a second here, but just so it's not coming from us. Maybe first, Scott, just reiterate maybe the grades from 2204, and in particular, those kind of last intercepts and what it ended in. And then I want Byron to just put that in context a little bit in terms of, not everyone may appreciate those spectacular grades.
Yeah, well, it was really quite scalable in the sense of the drill hole. We had 815 meters of continuous mineralization that went 0.41% copper equivalent, 0.3% copper within that interval, 2.5 grams of silver, 0.03 grams gold, 0.05 platinum, 0.09 grams per ton palladium for the entire interval. And then again, as we went downhole, we saw intervals that ran 20 to 100 meters wide that were pushing a percent or greater of copper equivalent. And then in those last few samples, the last 30 meters went 1.5% equivalent. The last 10 meters went 3.5% equivalent. And the last sample was a 0.6 meter length sample that ran 11.5% copper equivalent with 5.5% copper, 47 grams silver, 0.5 gram gold, 5 grams platinum, 5 grams palladium. So really spectacular.
And what we don't know is what happens next. And that's what we intend to find out this year. So Byron, just, thoughts on that.
Well, the grades are superb for contemporary mining. I mean, we can think, in the good old days of like the 1840s, for example, in the Keweenaw Peninsula of Upper Michigan, they were pulling samples like this out. This is elemental copper. This is 98% copper. That's just, you find these things as scientific specimens here and there anymore. But that was then in the 1840s, the first American, mining boom, you might say. And then everybody went out west to California for the gold rush, but in terms of what people are finding today, in the biggest mining areas in the world, in Chile and Peru, places, I mean, they're mining fractions of a percent of copper grade. So the idea that you're ending with open-ended in say 5% copper, that's terrific. That's knocking it out of the park. And then the sense that you throw in, I think you said 4 and 5 grams of platinum and palladium in Rustenburg, South Africa, they're mining 0.2 grams per ton from the platinum reefs at 1,000 meters below the ground. I mean, they're desperate to pull those ores out. The gold numbers are absolutely correct. There's no problem with that. You put it all together: copper, silver, gold, platinum, palladium. I mean, this is very, very valuable rock. You just, and now the question is, how much more of it can you find? Can you define the ore body? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to approach it in terms of, how would somebody mine it? What's the metallurgy, the mineralogy that comes out of it? But you begin with fabulous grade, and you're looking at fabulous grade by anybody's definition anywhere. And it's in, the middle of the United States. It's in southwestern Colorado, very, very mineable area, lots of historic mining there, and you can get things done.
And so, Greg, in terms of Newcrest themselves, I mean, we were really excited that it was them that came to the dance, and really liked what they saw specifically with that hole. Maybe talk a little bit about Newcrest, their expertise in these types of systems, what they saw.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been, the description of what we're talking about, starting to surface, 800 plus meters of mineralization, ending in mineralization. So, it's wider than that. So already that's got your attention, where you've got copper and you've got precious metals like that. But this kind of geologic porphyry, we call it a precious metal rich porphyry. These are some of the giants in the industry, some of the biggest porphyry systems. There's Grasberg in Indonesia. There's the Bingham Canyon mine in the same region that's on trend to the northwest. These are some of the world's biggest copper and precious metal deposits. So this kind of style of porphyry stands out as potentially being, able to be very, very large. And particularly for Newcrest, our new strategic investor, two of the largest globally, the Cadia mine down in Australia is the same geologic style. So Newcrest, yes, they're one of the world's largest mining companies with a focus on gold and copper, and they have these alkalic porphyries as two of their mines, Acadia and Red Chris, and these are very profitable operations. These are mined underground with a technology called block caving, which is a bulk tonnage. So from an environmental point of view, minimal disturbance. And the geometries that we're seeing here at La Plata appear to be very compatible with that approach to future mining. So they're just a great fit in terms of their expertise in the geology for these kinds of systems, as well as their expertise in the potential ways that you could approach mining these in the most environmentally sound manner. So we're really quite excited to be working with these guys. It's not just that they're a big check writer. It's not just that they're a big company. They bring special expertise that will really play a role in combining with our team's knowledge, having worked on systems like Galore Creek for NovaGold, which is now 50-50 owned by Newmont and Teck. It really brings extra depth to the team and should allow us to accelerate our exploration program. So we're really excited to have these guys on board.
I think it's remarkable too how fast it went. I mean, we talked about having the core on display at PDAC and having that hole was announced the week before. Multiple trips by multiple groups, and Newcrest really, obviously recognized that it fit their wheelhouse. You mentioned Newmont, so obviously back to some of the M&A activity we've seen. The Newmont bidding for Newcrest has been all over the news, and there's some timelines on that coming and so on. I guess maybe first, Greg, so in the event that happens, what does that mean for us, the project, and so on?
Yeah, I guess we'll see how it unfolds. But, if you read the bullet points on the Newmont proposed acquisition with Newcrest, you can see that the first two bullet points all are about the quality of the copper and gold assets in Newcrest and how that will add value to Newmont. So, Newmont has been active in acquisitions for copper gold systems. GT Gold was acquired, I think that was last year, up in British Columbia, a similar precious metal rich porphyry system. So, I think it's an indication, this extra M&A of, as Byron said earlier, we're moving into a new major commodity cycle. The majors are positioning themselves with the best potential good assets in safe jurisdictions. And clearly Newmont likes what Newcrest has. So we'll see how that unfolds. But, I think that La Plata is a plus to that portfolio that Newcrest already has in terms of those high quality projects that we already talked about. So I think we're all waiting to see how these things unfold. And it's an exciting times for investors to be looking at the exploration development side of the mining industry.
Yeah, I think either way, it's a comfortable position for us. Byron, sorry to jump in front of you there. I was going to just, your thoughts on maybe that specific arrangement. And then, there's other big ones, obviously, that have been in the news, like Glencore and Teck and so on.
Yeah, well, what's going on, what we see happening is that the other side of the need for all these minerals in the years to come is that you need big developments. I mean, it's easy to say all the really good stuff has been found. Yes and no. I mean, a lot of the really good stuff has been found because people prospected for 200 years, but people haven't explored, not with modern techniques, not with modern deep drilling, not with modern geophysics, not with modern Earth orbiting satellites and the kind of things that you can not with modern geophysical and plate tectonic concepts. There's still plenty to find, but to develop it takes a lot of money. And in order to kind of have the capital and have the human skills that you need to develop a really big project, which this has every indication of becoming eventually, you need big companies. And so the Newmonts of the world are looking around saying, if we're gonna do this over the next decades, we're big, but we need to get bigger. I mean, they're like a 30-some billion dollar market cap company, and Newcrest is, I think, like 17 billion. So it's like 2 for 1. But they want to get bigger. I mean, in fact, Newcrest was a spin out from Newmont a couple of decades ago, like 25 years ago, and they're sort of getting the band back together here. And who knows, for antitrust reasons, they might have to spin off this or that or whatever. But you can see what they're trying to do is build a big financially sound core that can raise the money, raise the capital, and assemble the teams that you need to do everything you need to do, from permitting to to engineering and design to construction to operations and everything else. And we're looking out over years and years for this to happen. But we're looking at, to the extent that we know what we see at La Plata, we're looking at something that could be a 100-year project. And Greg, one more thing, you mentioned Bingham Canyon on trend. Out in the Western United States, the U.S. Geological Survey has done some really spectacular work on these big mega trends in terms of the copper belt of Arizona, the copper belts and how they extend. And, there are maps out there. I've seen them at like Geological Society conferences and such, where, when you connect the dots and whatever, yeah, like where La Plata is right on a trend with Bingham Canyon. Bingham Canyon dates back to, I think, like 1902 was the first discovery. So, and it's still around. So 120 years later, they're still mining, at Bingham Canyon. So this La Plata could be, kind of a kissing cousin to something like Bingham Canyon.
Yeah, there's no question that the geography of where La Plata sits, it's in the very southern end of the Colorado mineral belt, which is kind of a northeast southwest trending mineralized region. And then there's a major continental scale break, which crosses through that across La Plata and heads to the northwest of Bingham. And so in a continental scale, we explorationists can wave our arms and show, how these relationships work, but we know the critical factors for a big porphyry system. These intrusions come from depth, and they come up along these major continental scale structures. So it's a great address for finding giants when you're working in a region that's already demonstrated, giant deposits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to add one other point. One of the reasons why the big gold companies are pursuing copper gold assets is the average gold mine has a mine life of something like 10 years. And so it's difficult to become a giant company with relatively small mine lives. And so the real attractiveness of a big copper gold porphyry is these things are huge cash flow generators, just in the backdrop, typically, let alone if you've got a commodity bull market that's going to unfold over the next couple of decades. And so to have these kind of assets in a gold company, from a cash flow generation point of view is really attractive with, as you said, some of these have, 20, 50, 100-year mine life histories for these bigger deposits. So these are big cash flow generators for the majors, and particularly attractive now for the diverse, for the precious metal focused groups like Newmont and others.
Scott, just U.S. federal government, Canadian federal government, others around the world, kind of with the critical minerals push. Obviously, the PGEs are critical minerals. Copper is considered critical in Canada. I suspect that will be added to the U.S. roster not too long, especially given some of the stats that Byron was indicating. But entities like the USGS, for example, obviously the Department of Energy is stick handling some of the funding from the Infrastructure Investment Act. But initiatives like Earth MRI, so speaking of the district as a whole and some of these structures and trends and stuff. So maybe that's worth a few comments on particularly that program and just that push for exploration.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue to talk about the idea that the USGS is partnering with the Colorado Geological Survey to undergo these types of studies as related to funding from the Infrastructure Act to identify these critical mineral sources, not only in Colorado, but around the country. One of the areas they've identified as a potential source is the La Plata Mountains. And so they are expending money, significant money this year to contribute to the understanding of the distribution of those minerals in the La Platas by mapping and sampling, and have recently announced the idea of doing geophysics to accentuate that work as well. And so we've actually partnered with both the USGS and the CGS and had a meeting actually yesterday morning where we're sharing information about the best way to advance not only their studies, but our understanding of the district and that distribution of those critical minerals. And so it's, I think, in a way, a validation of the district, in the sense that you see the US government knowing that we're going to have to overcome these supply chain issues and support the green energy transition. We're going to have to identify where these deposits are, and that La Plata as part of that plan is really intriguing.
I think maybe we'll just switch gears a little bit, come back to some of the, I'll segue using some of the acquisition M&A type activity. And maybe we just switch gears real quick and talk about our Kino project in Yukon. I know a lot of our long-term supporters and shareholders came aboard based on Kino. We want to just make sure that everyone knows that's not a forgotten project. It's not taking a back seat. This La Plata and Newcrest thing is happening now. It's worth talking about and really kind of getting that project on the map. But Kino is what got us started and continues to be a mainstay in the company. So I guess we could talk about Hecla coming in and taking over our neighbors at Alexco, then Hecla moving over to talk to ATAC and taking their Rackla project. Scott or Greg, maybe just take us to Kino and give a little bit on that too.
Yeah, maybe I'll just start out with very much Kino is a key asset for us still. The investment from Newcrest is focused at La Plata, but we are on the verge of publishing a first inaugural resource at Kino after several years of drilling. That's focused on our 5 most advanced target areas. Maybe Scott can go into a little bit more detail, but we recently published results on those, both high grade. Some of those are potentially bulk tonnage targets, but also new discovery of sheeted vein style bulk tonnage up to 170 meters wide in the eastern part of the district. So Kino, this is one of the world's highest grade silver districts. Alexco was taken over by Hecla. Hecla, now this is their highest grade silver operation. They're targeting to come online again Q3 of this year. So having the other half of the district to the east and targets adjacent to Hecla, this is a great asset. This is still something that we can really add value, and we're excited to deliver that first resource on the project there. And so, yeah, very much there will be catalysts that will be coming, from the work at Kino, and we still see that as a core, component of our valuation in the marketplace. Scott, do you want to add some comments in terms of maybe the particulars on a couple of those target areas?
Well, I'll just say, we have announced those results this year from our drilling in 2022. And the one thing that really stands out, and Greg mentioned it, is this 177 meters of mineralization. It's more modest grade, but this is really a new discovery for the district. They have not, all the focus has been on narrow, high-grade veins that are mined generally from underground. But this broad zone, which we call our Fox area target, of 177 meters wide, is really at surface, very shallow dipping, amenable to open pit or bulk tonnage operations. And that means potentially lower costs, lower development costs. So this is something that could be very interesting, not only to Hecla, but others that are in the silver business. And we'll look forward to having conversations with those. And one thing I think I'll add too, and Chris, you alluded to it, a lot of M&A in the district right now. I mean, it was Victoria Gold, who is one of our neighbors, and Hecla fighting over the ATAC ground to the east of us, because there's a lot going on in the district. They recognize value, and I think we'll see that sort of action continue as we go forward here.
I think that's it's a good point to make too, that the number of major mining companies that have invested in Yukon and Yukon companies over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, whatever. I mean, you see Rio Tinto at Western Copper, Coeur is in there, Hecla is in there. I mean, that Newmont, obviously, that list goes on. Byron, I think we met on a property tour in Yukon, and you've certainly been to the Kino site under Alexco, and you've certainly been to our ground. Yeah, take us back.
Oh, sure, several times. Yeah, I've been up to the Yukon many times in the last, pick a number, I don't know, 7 years or something like that. Alexco had one of the great silver discoveries of the last 25 years, the Birmingham discovery. It's now part of Hecla because they got bought out and everything, but you're right adjacent to them. You have much the same geology, much the same structure, different surface cover, more, kind of more of those annoying rocks at the surface that kind of get in the way of all the mineralization. But so you do the geophysics, you do the drilling, it's what you've been doing. And like Greg said, you're going to be coming out with a resource. The Yukon in general, just this company aside, but the Yukon in general is hot. It's smoking. You mentioned Rio Tinto with the Western Copper and Gold. I mean, we're just kind of waiting for these big companies to get through all their ESG and all of their due diligence and everything else, and I guess get all their pronouns straight or whatever they have to do in the corporate high suites there to pull the trigger and start making some of these takeovers happen. Safe jurisdiction, terrific place to operate, wonderful people, roads, highways, electricity. You can get diesel up there and back. You can get materials in and out. The Victoria Gold Eagle mine, it's an entire mine. Everything there was brought in from someplace else, every nut, every bolt, every wire bundle. So yes, you can build something really big up there and make it work and make a profit at it. So they've proven the concept. Now comes the follow through, and to be invested in general in the Yukon right now is a pretty good bet. I'll take that to the Kentucky Derby. As far as silver goes, I'll just say, everything we said about copper and shortage and everything, silver, yes. London Metal Exchange is at historic lows in terms of just how much metal is in the vaults. A lot of people are buying silver and actually taking delivery. Hey, what do you know? You basically can't do solar power without silver, and I mean a lot of it. So that's one of the big industrial drivers, in addition to everything else, the chemicals, the jewelry, the electronics that go into everything. So silver is a strong play moving forward. It's $25 an ounce, more or less lately. And yes, everything goes up, everything goes down because we live in this financialized world. But over the long term, silver has a very nice floor underneath of it, and it has a lot of blue sky above.
And these are in the Kino District, it's primary silver as well, whereas often silver is a byproduct of other base metals and so on. But these are primary ultra high grade deposits and systems up there, which sets it apart a little bit. And then federal and territorial government with some of the infrastructure. You've seen the Freehold Road under the Resource Gateway, and now the upgrades to the Silver Trail Highway, which does lead right to Kino and essentially to almost to the mill site. So there's that in the background too. And Greg, I jumped in front of you there.
No, I was just going to echo, we're very bullish on the metals, silver, copper, gold, the PGMs. We think we're entering this major long-term bull market for those. And we think jurisdiction-wise, Yukon and the Western US, these are great regions to be working on in terms of, mine development, exploration. And these are areas that first world jurisdictions that really have, the right kind of infrastructure and the right kind of regulatory framework, be able to build world-class mines that also respect, and minimize environmental footprints. So we think these are great locations to work.
By comparison, look at Mexico. Look what's going on down there in terms of how the AMLO, Manuel López Obrador, is limiting the ability of foreign companies to, expand, own, acquire additional acreage down there. Look at South America. You've got Chile that's talking about, sort of semi-nationalizing the lithium industry. I mean, there's a lot of resource nationalism going on. The rest of the world has figured out that their rocks and their ores and their minerals are very valuable, and they're starting to do what you would expect them to do. They're looking for their own self-interest. But in the U.S. and in Canada, certainly in the Yukon, and certainly in the Western U.S., you still have some of that rule of law stuff where you can actually acquire mineral rights and develop them.
I think the market needs to appreciate the political risk component. And I think at some point, assets that are located in the US and Canada are they should trade at a premium because of that lower risk profile. And I think we will see that at some point. I think the market is starting to appreciate that with some of these more far-flung assets in much riskier jurisdictions.
And you see some of the IRA funding again, Infrastructure Reinvestment Act with funding for processing as well. So you start to see that, and then you can get your actual domestic supply chain instead of having an ore shipped overseas to process and then the raw or the finished product being sent back. You can kind of bring all that in house too.
In between the USMCA, the successor to NAFTA, in between that free trade agreement and the U.S. Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act, which it has something to do with chips, but it mostly has to do with industrial development. And inflation has something to do with inflation, but mostly with industrial development, and something to do with infrastructure, but mostly to do with economic development. I mean, between all of that, there's actually a national industrial policy that's sort of common to the U.S. and Canada that allows capital and goods and people to move back and forth fairly seamlessly and get things done. So you've got most of the North American continent to work in. In this case, Kino Hill is one of the great silver jurisdictions of this continent, and La Plata is one of those hotspots of copper. So there you go.
It's actually, I was just going to jump in and give a quick plug for the Metallic Group, since we're talking about Yukon and the Western United States. So most of the people on the call will know that Metallic Minerals is the founding member of the Metallic Group of companies, which includes Stillwater Critical Minerals and Granite Creek Copper. Stillwater Critical Minerals being focused on nickel, PGE, copper, cobalt, gold in Montana, adjacent to the operating Stillwater mines by Sibanye-Stillwater, with a massive land package and plenty of news flow coming and plenty of strategic eyeballs on it as well. And then Granite Creek Copper, which is operating also in the Yukon with a large land position south of the operational Minto mine, held by Minto Metals and formerly Capstone back down the trail. So again, just commodities that are hot, jurisdictions that you can do business in, large land positions next to operators. So worth keeping an eye on our sister companies in that regard as well.
I'll add to anybody who's watching out there that I personally have visited both the Granite Creek, been to Minto, been to Granite Creek, and to Stillwater a couple of times out there in Montana, near Whitefish, Montana. And what we see out there in Montana, that's fabulous as well. Copper, nickel, platinum, lead, or platinum, palladium. I even have, let's see, there's a chunk of chromite that I have on my desk from out there. Great. This is 100%. You could throw this stuff into the alloying pot at the mill and add chrome to your steel. Just this is a rock that you just pick it up off the ground. I could throw this into the pot and have chrome alloyed steel out of this thing. It looks boring, but this is very, very high grade material. You just don't find this hardly anywhere. You have to go to South Africa or Russia to find stuff like this.
I guess so. We're coming up on a pretty close to the hour, so we want to do a little bit of Q&A. But I think that we should return to Yukon and return to our kind of unique proposition with the Klondike Alluvial Royalties Project. And Scott, maybe you start us off there and give us a little bit of that.
I think this is a really interesting asset for the company and makes us unique in the junior explorer space, in that, we have income coming to us from this royalty agreement that we've made with Little Flake Mining, who is really represented by Parker Schnabel of Gold Rush TV fame on the Discovery Channel. And most people have seen that show, know that it's really kind of dramatized, but that Parker is a big time operator, and he's an environmental award winner for the work he's done in the Klondike District. And that this agreement with Parker allows him to pursue mining upstream from where his operation was over the last several years, And he is planning, they're mobilizing to site now, but he's planning on mining between 10 and 20,000 ounces of gold this year, or sorry, 5 to 10,000 ounces of gold this year. Let you do the math, but at a 10 to 15% royalty, that's a significant amount of income for metallic minerals. And we expect to see this year over year going forward. And we have room in the alluvial portfolio of land that we've staked there in the Klondike, in Australia Creek, Melba Creek, other creeks as well, to add additional operators to really increase that amount of royalty income for the company that allows us not only to pay back office expenses for metallic, but perhaps as it grows, self-fund our exploration as we go forward. A really unique attribute for a junior explorer like us, and a key asset out of the 3 for metallic minerals.
And metallic is one of the largest alluvial claims holders in the Yukon, not the largest, but we're in that sort of top 3 to 5 range. Greg and Scott, when are we going to see you on the show?
I'll let Greg go on the show.
This, but for people who do watch the show, the property that Parker's going to be mining on this year is metallic minerals holdings at Australia Creek. So it will be exciting to watch that unfold.
It'll be good to see him wearing a metallic minerals hat. That's my goal in there. So maybe we'll just take it from there, take a break, and jump into the Q&A. First question is kind of I'll toss this out to you, Greg. So with the type of system I'm paraphrasing a little bit, with the type of system at La Plata, and assuming these drill holes that will get to the target depths, what could that mean in terms of resource expansion coming out of this year's program?
So we're sitting right now, your initial resource we delivered in spring of 2022 was, just under 1 billion pounds equivalent. So almost 900 million pounds of copper, 15 million ounces of silver. With the drilling from last year, right now the modeling work is happening with SGS. We're looking at an incremental expansion based on that, should push us north of 1 billion pounds for sure. It won't include the gold and platinum group metals. We still need to do more drilling to bring those into the next resource. So looking at the next update to have those. But just looking at the footprint, 1 billion pounds, if we look at these systems globally, other developers in the US and Latin America, right now, the average size porphyry system that's being worked on by juniors is 7 billion pounds. So at 1 billion pounds, we're on the small side and wide open. I think it really suggests, just spatially, we've got room certainly for a 3 to 5 billion pound system. I think that's an initial target for our company to try to pursue. And we think there's nothing that holds this back, because it's in this class of precious metal rich porphyries, which can be true giants. We may have something much larger than that. Time will tell. It's going to be an exciting program with the drilling that we're going to be starting next month. I can share that the team is very excited to get in there and offset that big discovery hole from last year. We anticipate really seeing, some pretty exciting results coming from that work.
I'm just going to jump around a little bit here. So another question, are there any plans to break the projects out into separate companies? I don't think that Alluvials would be a standalone, but
well, there's always optionality value, but we see much like the early days at Nova Gold, where we had multiple assets. If you've got good projects and you can add value and your team's got the right skills, it's not a bad thing to have kind of internal diversification, and a great silver asset in a great location with a great copper plus precious metal asset. Those are nice value adds. So at this point, we have no plans to separate these out. But down the road, there's always optionality and ways we can look at things depending on how things develop. But for the time being, great projects, adding value, and really bringing metallic, onto the radar screen.
So maybe Byron, maybe I'll hand off to you and then Scott. And it's a contemporary question. How much value does AI add, and where does it sit in the mining world on a scale of, in quotes, only useful at the margins to completely game changing. Byron, any thoughts there?
Yes, I've followed AI developments, and it's not useless, and it's a little bit game changing in the sense that it's going to increase the speed at which a lot of things can happen. AI at root is a way of taking the existing knowledge base and through your algorithms going around and scraping knowledge that's already out there real quickly and aggregating it into some sort of an answer or some sort of a composite. If you're scraping good knowledge, you'll get good answers. If you scrape up some bad knowledge, or if it just sort of makes stuff up along the way, you might get led astray. AI is not going to invent something new. I mean, AI can write an essay in the style of Ernest Hemingway, but first you need Ernest Hemingway. You know what I mean? AI cannot write a novel in the style of, Byron King, because Byron King hasn't written a novel, So I suppose you could write a newsletter like me, but it scrapes knowledge that's there, and it does it very fast and relatively efficiently. But you do have the quality control issue of AI. But in terms of what's out there, searching the databases, searching the knowledge bases of, if only we knew what we already know, well, now with AI, we can begin to know what we already know and do it a lot faster with a certain level of efficiency, but there's a risk factor of mistakes and errors in there too. AI has potential, but it's not going to change the game quickly. We're going to have to approach it carefully and prudently.
I think we were going to do a deep fake AI bot to do this job next webinar we have. We'll see how that goes. Scott, we've actually worked with some of the AI artificial intelligence groups.
We have on both of our projects, Kino and La Plata. We've worked with a company called Goldspot Discoveries. Goldspot is very skilled and knowledgeable in terms of applying machine learning and artificial intelligence to data packages to help not only understand the distribution of mineralization in those deposits, but to target potential new discoveries. And particularly at La Plata, it's been, I think, very effective in that I showed the slide earlier with the 10-kilometer circle over the district. Within that, and actually outside of that, we've identified 16 different potential porphyry centers from the work that Goldspot Discoveries has done in layering our data very systematically and applying that machine learning AI concept to it. And so we haven't gone out and tested those, but we see the potential for those to become new discoveries, and we're looking forward to getting some of those targets drilled in the near future. So
Speaking of that, excuse me, how long is the drilling season at La Plata?
Well, I would say, depending on budgets, you can drill year round there, but just really depends on how much you want to spend and how much effort you want to go into it. The typical drill season at La Plata is going to be probably mid-May up until early December, typically. So you're pushing the ends of the season there in December, but it really depends on the year and the snow year. And again, we all know the Western US had a really large snow year this winter. And it's, we're being cautious about how we enter into the La Plata district to make sure we're being efficient with the dollars that we have, and looking forward to getting started sometime in June.
And how's the infrastructure, access and other infrastructure?
We've got a significant highway just south of the property within a couple of miles. We've got a road network right up into the property. It allows us to use drills that are brought in on skid or on track, or however you want to do it. The infrastructure is there. We've got power close by as well. So this is, it's a pretty good spot to be doing work. In Southwest Colorado, there close to Cortez and Durango.
Byron, I'm going to come back to you in 1 second with a question, and then that'll be a jumping off point from that question back to Greg to round it out. But Greg, sort of, we've talked about this a little bit or alluded to it, but information on 2023 drilling at La Plata, how much can we say in terms of meterage, rigs, locations? We touched on it, but maybe just encapsulate it.
Yeah, so as Scott mentioned earlier, we're looking at a multi-phase program. So starting out with a phase one next month, probably about 5,000 meters initial program. Based on that results, we'll look at, do we need to add more drills? Phase two program, possibly, about the same size. So by far, this is going to be the biggest program ever by any company, including Rio Tinto or Freeport, in terms of an individual year on the project. And, our anticipation is these are going to be very meaningful holes as we start to offset that high grade discovery. It's going to be an exciting time to be monitoring the progress, and there'll be news releases that will be basically starting up here with the start of the program and well into the fall and early next year.
Okay. Byron, this one is for you. So Trudeau here in Canada has indicated that he wants copper concentrates smelted within the country versus Asia. Only copper smelter is not in Yukon. It's east in Quebec, I believe, at least according to the question. Comments on that, and maybe coming back to that, we talked about it a little bit about just processing in general in US, in Canada, and kind of bringing that home.
Well, I'd say that over the last, let's say 50 years, since the early 1970s, the smelting and refining sectors of the US and Canadian economies have declined just dramatically. I mean, in the olden days, there were smelters quite located all over the place. Today, hardly any. And when you talk with the people in the Yukon, when you talk to the people in British Columbia, across Canada, you say, well, what do you, okay, you're going to mine your ore and you're going to crush it, you're going to concentrate it. What do you do with the con? Oh, I put it on a truck, I put it on a train, I send it out to Vancouver, I send it down to Skagway, Alaska, or whatever, or, and off it goes on a ship somewhere to Korea Zinc or to China or Japan or something like that. The rest of the world has built out their own refining industry. They bit the bullet. They built the refineries with the energy costs, the air emissions, the water emissions, and everything else, and they've done the refining. There are still a few refineries left in Canada and some in the U.S., not that many. They're smelters, and but good luck, no matter what anybody says, good luck building that stuff, those kind of things today. Might happen. It's going to be a long, complicated process with every environmental group and every environmental attorney in town setting up roadblocks in front of you. I'm just sort of telling you what the landscape is. It would take truly. The countries would have to be at full scale war and then do a crash program. And even then, when it comes to building refineries, I mean, where are the people to run them? I mean, most colleges and universities in the U.S. and even Canada have very small programs in that sort of metallurgical engineering. People who know how to do that are a very rare brood, and so I think we're going to do well to develop mines and mineral concentrates. We had better stay friends with a lot of countries in the world where the smelting and the refining goes on. You never say never, but whatever happens is going to happen slowly and deliberately, and it's going to be like pulling teeth every step of the way.
I guess if one was going to be optimistic, there's been this at least a lip service and some degree of shift from the NIMBY of the mining industry, out of sight, out of mind, the materials coming from elsewhere, to at least mining those in these countries. So you could, if you look down the trail and that sort of attitude persists, maybe there's hope. Byron sounds skeptical, but I choose to be Pollyanna.
Well, there's another way to look at this. And that is, Byron, it's a high barrier to entry, but you do have groups like Teck in British Columbia that has a very modern smelter. You do have Rio Tinto smelter in Salt Lake City, which is one of the most modern large-scale smelters in the world. And those guys can always look at expansion, right? So in a way, you can flip this on its head to say, if you're already in that business, there may be an opportunity for those that are already established to be able to expand and take advantage of this. But we all acknowledge some of these things are challenging. And yet, you know, an individual mine, it wouldn't be common historically anyways for an individual mine to build that kind of processing on site for these industrial commodities. You know, normally you do produce a concentrate that's processed, you know, elsewhere. So it's not an impediment to developing the mines, as you said. It's more of a, where does that material then go for processing and value add?
Yeah, the Rio Tinto Salt Lake City smelter, the smokestack is taller than the Empire State Building in New York City. And it was purpose built really to handle Bingham Canyon. But now that Bingham Canyon is coming to somewhat the end of its life, although they'll still be mining there for a long time. They just have to go underground. It's going to be less product. I mean, Rio is sniffing around the entire Western United States looking for product to feed that smelter. Yeah, you know, and so that in a way that's good, because when you've got Rio out there ready to buy your product, that's a nice offtake. Yeah, I guess I was, yeah, my focus is just on trying to build something new. Yeah, good luck. But the ones that are there are very valuable assets.
Jumping back to alluvials for one quick shake here, Scott, from the land package that Parker has with us right now, what's the mine life? How many years can he operate there before moving on to the next block? And where do we foresee that going?
Well, I think currently he's working on, or will be working on, a water license that's good for 3 years. So we expect him to maximize his mining over the next 3 years. But the next package of land is, you know, permitted, and we can just keep skipping up the stream and in Australia Creek to provide additional ground for him over the next decade plus as it goes. So.
Okay, coming to the end of the questions, just a couple more. Greg, CapEx in copper mining, just general comments. I know it can't necessarily apply to La Plata yet, but just speak to the expense of CapEx typically in a copper porphyry system.
Yeah, so it's going to really depend on the ultimate scale. I mean, a lot of the economics we've done in our resource right now are looking at more modest scale operations. For instance, there's a block cave operation operated by New Gold at New Afton, about 16,000 tons per day underground. So that's a snapshot, and you know, an operation like that might be in the sub $1 billion range. You know, it's a good reason if you're looking at these very big systems to have a big partner that's involved down the road. And we see our industry, we really see two sets. You got the explorer developers, and there's a skill set of those who find and grow and de-risk projects. And that's where our expertise in the metallic group comes in, you know, in our experience working with the majors, learning what the majors are looking for, and then working for groups like Nova Gold and Nova Copper, Trilogy Metals, and others. But yes, when you get to the point where you want to build these things, they can be quite large depending on the scale, and they do require those big experienced companies and balance sheets to come in. But that's a ways down the road for something like La Plata. When we look at something like a Kino Hill, one of the really nice things about those very small footprint ore bodies is the capex is quite modest. And so something at Kino Hill could be less than $100 million to build it, or you might even utilize the mill next door with Hecla if you did some arrangement where it was a toll milling or a joint venture.
Okay, that's actually all she wrote on the Q&A part, unless anybody has any last minute ones. We could probably call it there. We're a little bit over time. I thought we were going to be sub hour, but it's been an hour and 10 minutes. So we can let everybody get back to their day. And obviously we're always happy to talk on the phone or via email if anybody has any further questions or comments for any of the panelists. Before we go, Byron, maybe just give a plug to your writings and your associates.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again. It's been a pleasure. And everybody who's watching, thank you so much for taking your time to watch. We really appreciate that. I'm Byron King. I work with a group called Paradigm Research, Paradigm Research. I work with Jim Rickards, on a newsletter called Strategic Intelligence. Next week, I'm not sure when people might be watching this because it's going to be on YouTube, but on May 17th, 2023 at 1 p.m., we have a free, no cost to you, live cast with Jim Rickards and Danielle DiMartino Booth talking about what's going on with the U.S. economy, the Fed, inflation, price of gold, directions of the currency, the BRICS, new currency, the currency after next, whatever. There is a link that we have in our chat room here to the Jekyll Island Conference, JEKYLL Island. It's in Georgia. It's where the cabal met to hatch the idea of the U.S. Federal Reserve back in 1910. But I'll be down there next week. We have a conference, but Jim Rickards and Danielle are going to do a live cast on Wednesday, the 17th of May at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and it's free. Sign up if you feel so inclined. Thank you.
That's great. And we did include that in the chat for anybody who wants to grab that link and sign up. We'll also include it in the note we'll send around subsequent to having this posted on our YouTube channel. So we can have a second kick at the can. Also, we are participating in the Copper Conference tomorrow. So Greg will be presenting with James Conner of Bloor Street Capital. Watch out for that. We have it on our social media platforms where you should follow us at MMG Silver on Twitter. But again, just reach out anytime with any of the questions. And thank you all. Your time spent on webinars is much appreciated. So that's a nice thought to round it out on, unless Greg, Scott, you have anything to take us out with.
Thank everybody for joining us. As Chris said earlier, feel free to reach out on email or through the social media links. Happy to take questions at any time, but it really is shaping up to be an exciting year for Metallic Minerals shareholders, and we look forward to providing future updates.
Okay, gentlemen, thanks. It's been fun, and we'll see you in the office in Byron, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Okay, we'll see you again. We'll see you up in Yukon in July.
Absolutely. Okay, take care, everyone.